Hello and welcome back to the show with me, Nick Griffin, here on Beyond the Pale. And you are all very welcome indeed, whether you're joining me live or perhaps joining me later on, as I know that many of you do. Now, I've got a lot for you today, so let's dive straight into the show, and I'll come back and see who's in the chat there a little bit later on. So what have I got for you? All sorts, as I say, all sorts. Hang on, let's go back up to the top. What we got here? Yes, of course, I've got to start by talking, but it's not going to be the whole show, by talking about the ongoing Iran conflict. And of course, we're seeing at the present Donald Trump swinging drastically from one side to another, peace or all-out war. And just before every new turn, some insiders place huge bets and buy and sell stocks and futures on a staggering scale. We're talking about millions upon millions upon millions of dollars being made. Money it's not made, but being grabbed by criminal vermin who are very, very close to the president indeed. There is no other possible explanation for what is going on. It's a staggering degree of corruption. It's like if you studied the history of early modern England, the England of, say, the 18th century under weak prime ministers like Walpole. And it was wall-to-wall corruption, with people buying their places in the House of Parliament, then using their place in the House of Parliament to pass laws exclusively designed to benefit them and their friends. This was the period when they stole, already finished off stealing, 1/3 of the entire land of England from the English people, our common land. And they did the same with the Scots and the Welsh, and they did the same with the Irish, because only the Irish remembered this, and they turned it into a national thing against the English. This was not the English. The English were robbed first, then the Scots, then the Welsh, and then the Irish by the same Anglo elite. And the corruption of those days was in the end brought to heel by the ultra-religious Victorians, who did one of the things that they stamped out. They did some things wrong, they did other things very right. And they stamped out corruption and just that sort of behavior to such an extent that when the British were in India, especially in the early days, a British officer could walk into any little Indian shop and buy anything he wanted to on credit, even if they'd never seen him before, because an English gentleman's word was absolutely his bond. There was no possibility of him running off with the money, as anyone else that they didn't know from their own community would almost certainly do. But that was a huge change from where we were not that long before, when we had this endemic corruption, the likes of which you now see on a staggering scale in the United States of America. Now, there's an idea going around, and people who don't like Muslims are very happy with the idea that all those Muslims out there, all the groomers and all the ones I don't want in my country, blah, 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 they're all really angry about this war on Iran. Bombing Iran is really hurting them. It's fantastic, isn't it? Well, no, it's not. One, because butchering innocent civilians, whether in Iran or in Gaza or anywhere else, is completely immorally wrong in any case. But secondly, because this isn't hurting most Muslims in the slightest. All the West's counter-jihad idiots, morons, are likewise peddling the idea that bombing Iran is somehow hitting Muslim terrorists. But it's simply not. The truth, as I know that a lot of my regulars know, is that Al-Qaeda, ISIS and the hardline Sunnis, who range from the very top of the government of the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia, right down to the biggest crackpot giving out Qurans on your high street on a Saturday morning, they're all absolutely delighted with the Netanyahu Trump Purim war against their Shia rivals in Iran. And that's the point. It's because most of them, 90% of them, are Sunni, and they hate the Shia. It's as simple as that. And Iran is Shia, so they're not in the least bit fussed. They think this is just great. Now, if you think I'm off the mark here, remember the old saying that money talks and bullshit walks, as we take a look at this. Let's get this picture for you. Right then. Yeah, so this is a headline from the Iran Institute, which is a pro-Iranian Shia think tank, which is based in London. Now, I'd rather these people weren't based in London, but they're no worse than the ultra-capitalist, ultra-American deep state think tanks, also based in London, which have far more money and far more power. Anyway, on the 23rd of this month, this institute published on its website an article, headline is here, entitled, "Is the UK's Muslim humanitarian sector failing to help the Iranian people?" And their answer is very much yes. The article reports that, quote, 3 weeks into US and Israeli airstrikes hitting Iran, and Britain's Muslim charity sector, which raises over £700 million a year, does not appear to have launched a single dedicated Iran appeal. The UK's top 20 Muslim charities, ranked in the Iran Institute report of 2023, including a top 5 of Islamic Relief Worldwide, which in 2023 raised just shy of £149 million, the Aga Khan Foundation, £59 million, the Ummah Welfare Trust, Muslim Hands, and the Penny Appeal, which despite its name raised £31.5 million, all the way right down to the Balkis Welfare Foundation in 20th place of leading Muslim charities in Britain, which merely raised just under £7 million. Not one of them has done anything for Iran, despite the fact this article says that an estimated 3.2 Iranians have been displaced in just 2 weeks of strikes. Remember, this is me speaking here, that this article is now but a week old. The article continues, hospitals, power stations and civilian infrastructure are being systematically destroyed. The Iranian Red Cross is appealing urgently for international support. Now, the piece goes on to point out that there are potential difficulties in getting relief to Iran due to UK sanctions, but that this isn't an excuse because there are special humanitarian licenses which are granted in such cases. Let me just get rid of that picture now, shall we? Don't want that there all the time. Go away. Right, I'm back. So that's what they're saying. They also point out in this article that the British Red Cross, Save the Children, and a SAT7 UK, whatever that may be, are running appeals and providing aid to the Iranian people. But the Muslim establishment in Britain, the humanitarian sector, is simply sitting on its hands. Now, this is just part of the global hostility of the Sunni authorities and, to a large degree, although not so much, the Sunni street to Iran. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, one of the richest men in the world, and also head of one of the most intolerant and brutal Islamist dictatorships, and a long-standing sponsor, Saudi Arabia, the big one, of actual Islamic terror everywhere from the USA to Syria and Britain. Saudi Arabia and its Crown Prince is urging Israel and its US attack dog to press on with the war for a regime change in Tehran. And you can bet your life that Saudi Arabia will also be bribing lawmakers, as they're now called, politicians, particularly in the United States, so particularly around and probably including Donald Trump, to carry on with this war. It is not just a Zionist problem. There's also the Christian Zionist lunatics, and there's also this very large section of the upper echelons of Sunni Islam. All of them want this war. It's really, really dangerous. So I'll come back to following on from that in a minute. Let's just dive in and see. Oh, joined by all sorts of people here. Ken Wood from across the water was first in. Good day to you, sir. Brian Payton, Lady Matriarch, Peter Holder from over here, Paul Telford, likewise. Ivan Cooper, another senior moment, should sign in order to say hi. Krista Strid is with us. Who really runs the world? But Simon Dixon. Yes, it was good, Ivan. It's really good, isn't it? Well worth a look. Mitch Cameron is here. And let me just drag this down. Yeah, there's a bit of a chat there between Templar brothers there. Various folk in good health. That's good to see. Right then. Now, this division in the Muslim world is one of the reasons, it's only one of them, why all the hysterical, chronic defeatism about the threat of Islam is so wrong. Now, yes, Islam in the West is dangerous. Sunni Islamic radicalism in a decadent West is very dangerous, and quite likely, even without the Zionist neocons pushing from the other side, it's quite likely to lead to civil war. There's a big chunk of these people who do believe that one of their roles here, their God-given role, and our given role, is to take over our entire society and turn it Muslim. Yeah, they believe that. But they're not going to conquer us. Listen, there are quarrelsome, petty people. Historically, they've always been like that. Anytime they even win a victory, they immediately tear themselves apart in their own civil wars as they squabble over the spoils. That's one of the reasons the Spanish and the Portuguese were able to take back Portugal and Spain. It's one of the reasons that we're still here. This deep, deep division between Sunni and Shia, and within the Muslims themselves, especially the Sunnis, is the only reason that the Crusader states, tiny little outposts in Palestine, were able to survive for several hundred years. Yes, when the Crusades arrived, tens of thousands of heavily armored knights, so armored, in fact, that Saracen arrows simply couldn't hurt them. Yet when the Crusades were there, obviously they could deal with the Muslims. But by the time they'd won a couple of battles, they'd had their victory, they'd said their prayers at the shrines in Jerusalem, they all went home. Very few stayed there. The Crusader states were tiny, and they were only able to survive because the Shia and the Muslim and the Sunni were at each other's throats, and Damascus and Egypt were always at each other's throats. It is interesting, by the way, there's a great deal of material in this book, Pilgrims of the Sword, published by my friends over at the Knights Templars. You can buy this on their bookstore. Let me just show you, by the way. Beautiful book. Look at the quality of that. It really is absolutely fantastic. It's massive, and it's very well researched, and it's very well written. I can tell you it's well written because I wrote lots of it. But there you go. If you're interested in history, that really is a book worth getting. I can tell you that. And if you're not that interested in history, you can just take my word for it that these people, as they're showing now, even when their Muslim brothers are being slaughtered by the tens of thousands, given that the Iranians were the only people who really stood up for the Palestinians in Gaza, because the Arab states in bed with Israel certainly didn't. Yet despite that, the Sunnis of Britain still won't lift a finger for them, still won't give them any money. Just how shocking is that, and how much an indictment of their system it is, and how it's an indication that while we should be worried about them, and we must be worried about them, and we're going to have trouble with them, it is not trouble which in the end we will not win, because we will. Now, lest you think that I'm fixated on the badness of Sunni Muslims at the moment, and they're not all bad. I'm talking about their leadership and some of the ones on the street as well. Quite a few rotten bad ones out there, but we got rotten bad people too, as for that matter have the other peoples of the book, the Jews. So I'm going to show you in a moment what I found fascinating. It's a horrifying short video by an American lady on the war in Iran, and specifically on the problem of the Talmud. But as this lady points out, it's not the book of most Jews. Most Jews haven't read the Talmud, don't read the Talmud, don't study it. But it is the guidebook for Netanyahu and co, and especially for the ultra right-wing, basically fascist, ultra-religious Jews who are part of his coalition and who are the tail wagging the dog in many ways. And this video explains just some of the horrifying, utterly horrifying madness of what is a satanic cult, which is falsely claiming to speak for all Jews. And that point is made very, very clearly by the fact that this lady is herself Jewish. So you have a look at what she has to tell us about the religious maniacs who basically have seized control of her people. They against the wishes of many, many good people are included. Have a look.
Today is March 16th, 2026. This is an urgent message to all members of the United States Armed Forces. I'm Elizabeth Glass. I became an activist in 2019 when the two youngest of my 4 kids were kicked out of school due to New York's forced shot law. When I found out that kids were getting deadly shots at school without parental knowledge or consent, I decided to challenge the sponsor of that law. I scored 34% of the in-person vote in the primary in 2020, highlighting cracks in the globalists' armor. I have close relatives who created military weapon systems. Certain Air Force generals, Pentagon officials, and experts in electronic warfare and weather warfare will know who my relatives are. I'm Jewish. I had a bat mitzvah at a Reform synagogue on Long Island in the 1980s. My late grandmother was president of Hadassah, the women's Zionist organization, and when I was in high school, I was a member of the Masonic B'nai B'rith youth organization. In my opinion, most Jews are like my relatives, law-abiding, and they just want to live their lives. When I was a child in Hebrew school, we did not study the Talmud. Only a small percentage of Jews do. However, Netanyahu has proclaimed that the Talmud is the basis for the Israeli legal system. The 2,711-page Talmud, quote, inculcates an attitude of scorn and hatred of Gentiles, or non-Jews, and includes statements such as, quote, even the best of the Goyim should be killed. Goyim is a derogatory term for non-Jews or Gentiles. And, quote, all children of the Goyim are animals. No Jews I have ever known held these beliefs. However, the Epsteins and the Netanyahus of the world do have these beliefs. That is why the attack on Iran started with the bombing of an Iranian elementary school that killed 165 little girls. As a member of the United States Armed Forces, you are fighting for demons that view you as an animal. The attack on Iran started on Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat prior to Purim, a holiday commemorating when Jews murdered 75,000 Persians. According to Jewish law, Jews are commanded to kill all the men, women, and children of Amalek, the enemies of Israel. In my opinion, the true strategic goal of this war is depopulation. President Trump has claimed that we won in Iran and that the United States will stay and finish the job. However, this article, Is America Winning or Losing the War with Iran, by Ron Unz, call the president's assertions into question. When Trump, a member of Chabad, like Netanyahu and Putin, states that he will finish the job, is he referring to the Talmudic goal of killing Amalek? Over 200 anonymous complaints have been logged to the Military Religious Freedom Foundation by U.S. troops who were told by euphoric Zionist Christian commanders that the Iran war is for Armageddon and a return of Jesus Christ. Trump's press secretary has stated that a draft is not off the table. The Iran war is an illegal war based on lies told by Israel and accepted by our government. The Zionist goal is not just the Greater Israel Project, but world domination per the Talmud. And you can guarantee that uncooperative Jews will be lumped in the Goyim pile. To U.S. soldiers, I will say this: the most patriotic thing that you can do is do not go. Become a conscientious objector or exit the situation as creatively as possible. It is your right to disobey unlawful orders. Americans need to pull together to fight the Zionist and Masonic forces that have taken over our nation, our government, our courts, utilities, financial, medical, education, and other systems. A final call to action. Share this message with U.S. soldiers, potential draftees, their families, and others. Join the BDS movement, boycott Israeli products, and know that there is power in numbers. I'm Elizabeth Glass. Thank you.
Wow, how about that for a message to US troops? But also, of course, it's a message to all of us, and especially as our own religious lunatics, the heretical Christians, especially in the United States, are in on this disaster as well. The message to the soldiers is simple, obviously. Do not go. Well, God bless that woman. That's all I can say. God bless that woman. Now, let's dive into the chat. Where I've been kindly told us that he could hear. Ken would say it's kind of really low volume. Oh, Paul Telford said it was fine. Ken, perhaps you're going deaf. Yes, indeed. What the Talmud says about Christ is indeed horrific. Marty BRP is here. Good to see you, Marty. She's right, and it's an illegal war. Yes, absolutely so. Right then. Where we got to? I know. Yep. Moving on now. Oh, just one more thing on that, in case I forget. That if you really go into the depths of this, to the extent to which this Talmudic stuff is actually in Kabbalah, it's magic. Magic sort of with a K, really. It's an evil, really dark magic. If that worries you because you think, well, you know, this is something real. Evil is real. So can we beat it? Yes, we can. And there's two ways you can guarantee that. First of all, this religious mania on this scale last afflicted a section of the Jewish population back in the 1660s, when a man called Sabbatai Levi in what's now Turkey, yeah, what was then Greece stroke Turkey, came up with the idea that he was their Messiah. And huge numbers of Jews flocked to him and believed him, and they were absolutely convinced he was about to bring about the end of the world, and they'd all go to Jerusalem and live happily ever after and rule over the rest of us. Exactly the same madness. And finally, he was pulled up by the Sultan, who got some archers and said, right, we're going to fill you full of arrows. We're going to turn you into a rabbi pincushion. Whereupon the Messiah suddenly said, oh, well, no, actually, it's kidding all along. If it's okay with you, I'll convert to Islam, and we'll say no more about it. And that was that. Same sort of thing. Alternatively, or if evil is really, really real, as proper Christians believe, if evil is really very, very real, then so too is good. And Satan, the prince of darkness, is only a fallen angel, and the good side is led by God, the creator of everything. So in the end, God and good will trump Satan and all his little imps and evil. You can rely on that. Right then, I want to move on to a totally different subject, still about sort of potential trouble and what to do about it. Something really positive. Now, I've been writing on Substack recently, and do please come and join me on Substack, Nick Griffin Beyond the Pale. If you haven't already got it, it's a wonderful app with some fantastic journalism by all sorts of people. It really does what the supposedly free press gave up doing many, many years ago. Videos on there as well if you're not into reading. It's great. Come and join me and many other good people on Substack. But on there, I've been writing about the sort of positive things that we need to be doing to build our communities. And although I'm mainly talking about Britain, and I'm writing particularly here about Britain, it's very, very relevant if you're in America, Australia, Sweden, or wherever. Roughly speaking, we all face the same kind of problems. We're going to face even worse, and the solutions are generally the same. So I've been writing on there about community observation patrols, which likewise the Templars have been helping with up in Hayward, Lancashire. And I've been writing about what can be done to formalise the Raise the Colours movement with flag and poppy display groups locally, about the enormous potential, strangely enough, for soup kitchens. But all these things are only stepping stones. All of them are stepping stones. And I want to look now at where those stepping stones lead. Now, as with so much of this, where do we go from here as we're dragged towards not just war, but also civil war, there's a lot can be learned from Northern Ireland. For the simple reason that both communities in Northern Ireland on the old religious divide have been through the same sort of things that we are going to get. And they try to deal with these in all sorts of ways, but the constructive community-based things that they came up with had an enormous effect for good for their communities and can do for us as well. So as I've looked at this, I've been taken by two things in particular over there. First of all, a local community shop in Loyalist Comber, which is, if you look at the front of it, it's simply another charity shop. But if you look in the back, the money from this charity shop goes not to the British Heart Foundation or to buy Bibles for little African children or whatever. The money goes to the local community. Specifically, it funds the setting up, quite expensive, and running of a gym in the back of the shop, which is for youngsters. Absolutely great. Really, really good. And the old ladies go in there and sit and have a chat and a natter and a cup of tea and keep warm as well. So that's a very important and to me quite inspiring thing. And on the other hand, the other side, the Sinn Féin advice centres, little tiny advice centres in semi-derelict shops all over the working class Republican areas of Northern Ireland. Some years ago, during the Troubles, they've taken a back seat now. Sinn Féin are in power. They basically defeated the rather more moderate nationalist inclined SDLP. So they're in power. They feel nothing's going to shift them. They're interested in any case in the third world, in immigrants and in LGBTQ stuff rather than their own people. So they don't really bother with the advice centres anymore. But they did, and they were hugely important to help them come from being very much an outsider group, a political wing of a terrorist organisation, to becoming the political machine of the Catholic working class. And they did it largely through advice centres. They were so good. But on top of that, I did a visit not that long ago to a locally run community centre. A lot of them are run by councils, that's a different matter. But a locally run community centre charity in England, somewhere north of Birmingham. I will say no more than that because I don't want to get them into trouble. But also they're very, very inspiring indeed. So what I've created from this is the concept of community centres as the future hub of our resistance to being displaced in our own country, to being second-class citizens in our own country, to suffering as victims in our own country, and to being exploited and ignored by our own elite in our own country. They're actually far more than community centres. I'm using as a working title the idea that these things, once established, are in fact community strong points, or a community with them is a strong point. It's not just an ordinary area where outsiders can come in and do what they want and push people around and there's no pushback. This is somewhere where our people are deeply and effectively organised, cohesive and united. Now, before I dive into the actual mechanics of this, I'll just take a moment to go back to the chats. Stuart Bowden, what do I think about the Woodlander initiative? I think it's great, Stuart. I think it's absolutely great. And I will be covering it actually in a further chapter in my What Is to Be Done series on Substack, and also where I think it's more important than even the people doing it at present perhaps understand, or certainly more important than they've articulated. But I think it is really good. Andy Lightham has joined us. Good evening to you, sir. And Mitch Cameron was, he just likes what we're talking about. Good, excellent. I'm not going to talk about, Marty, the installation of the so-called Archbishop of Canterbury. No, we will give that one a miss. And as Lady Matriarch says, yes, Lady Matriarch also done quite a lot of writing and thinking on this, and she's come up with the idea of a closed English community. It's just for us. Yep, because everyone else can have that. Why can't we have it? Well, we've got some battles to win, political and legal battles before we can, but this is part of it. So what would a strong point community centre look like? Well, first of all, it's actually a physical thing. It's in a building or possibly buildings. Now, typically you can think of, if you're a Brit, just think of a rundown shopping centre somewhere near you, or shopping street, high street, in a fairly working class town or suburb. So typically you've got large shops with not just the shop, but also offices and so on above it, and storage space and a backyard as well, out onto the next back street on a rundown high street, or perhaps a church or a chapel with an attached hall. Now, over the next 15, 20 years, thousands of Church of England churches and their ancillary centres will simply be closed down, as will all the chapels, the Methodists and all the rest of it. An enormous amount of property, which actually really belongs to us in a community sense anyway, used to be the heart of our community, and some of these will be wholly unsuitable for, or simply banned by on account of being listed buildings and so on, they won't be suitable for conversion into residential buildings. So they'll just lie there empty and available, perhaps on a long lease or whatever, very, very cheaply. Likewise, the demographic disaster, which is only just beginning to unfold, is going to create more and more closed down primary schools. Now, they've all got classrooms, a meeting room, a kitchen facility and so on, playground space outside. They've got everything a community centre needs. They've really got nothing which a housing development needs. So those two are going to be available. So getting the premises for a group of people who are sufficiently committed and determined and understand what they want to do with this, finding the premises will not be the problem. What would you do with the premises? Well, the front end, like I said, a charity shop. Next to that, a small office, which should also be the advice centre. Now, all over Britain, certainly, I don't know about in places like America, did you even have things such as what we call the Citizens Advice Bureau? These are operations run partly funded by local councils, partly by big charities, and partly by local charities. And they were there to offer advice to local people. Now, back in the BNP days, I used to wonder how someone in one of these little offices knew everything. It was quite remarkable. Then we found out that all they had was simply the CAB nationally had produced a disk which was their database, which had the answer to basically any problem that anyone might take into one of their advice centres. So whoever was in the advice centre wasn't highly skilled. They just knew how to search the database and were then competent enough to read out and give advice, about print out a couple of forms and so on. That was all they did. Now, we approached the CAB and said, right, you're providing this database also, we understand, to councillors. So please, we want it for our councillors too. And they flat refused. Now, one of the mistakes I made, leading the British National Party, was we were so, is fixated the right word? Very nearly. We were so focused on fighting elections and having won seats, holding the seats, a near impossible task, that we didn't put enough effort into other things. And one of the things we should have put effort into was the lawfare that was required to start to secure for our people, in the small party sense and the big British sense, some basic rights. Because that CAB decision was completely illegal under equality law. We should have taken their equality law and used it as a weapon against them and got that CAB database for our councillors, but we let it go and didn't. So that was a mistake, and it's a mistake that you now see Rupert Lowe and so on fixated on elections on a grand scale, making exactly the same mistake. They haven't got any excuse. Nobody told me it was a mistake. I didn't understand it. I've now told them repeatedly, and I'm going to carry on telling them, you're making a mistake. Even if you're going to fight elections, you must do other things as well. And this lawfare to secure the rights of our people is a very important thing. Get on and do it. But of course they won't. But anyway, a local independent charity would have no problem even getting the database from the CAB. And if they did, 5 or 6 of them could band together and simply go to the CAB with the beginnings of a legal case, and they get their disk. And that way they can start operating really well-informed advice centres in their own area, just like in a town near you. Towards the back of this place, there could be, as there is in the one in Comber, Northern Ireland, a gym for the youngsters, which, when they're not there, could be used, for instance, for a local food bank. Could be used as a meeting room. And there's probably a kitchen there, or something can be installed, somewhere where pensioners can go for a warm place in the winter and for socials once a week or whatever, to remember the good old days and to have some friendship and to be looked after, because that's what a community is supposed to do. It's a place for mother and toddler groups to meet, where ideally there's also room somewhere to store things like prams and baby goods and so on, so that when there's a newly pregnant mother, young girl perhaps first time in the community, she knows she simply goes there and they kit her out with what she needs. So there's no point worrying about the fact we're being replaced unless you start to think, well, how do we help our people to have children? And having children in a poor, rundown area on minimum wage and so on, it's not easy. It can be a damn sight easier, not just actually physically and in money terms, but also in a moral and a mental way, if other people are helping with operations like that. in the kitchen and connected with the community, the outreach food things that I talked about on Substack, and I think probably here on the show as well in the past. The kitchen can do community meals for festivals and for fundraising events. Far more to it than that. This place would be a storage. This is why perhaps you might actually have to have two, one either side of the high street or something like that, because one might not be big enough, because you need a storage space and a meeting facility for all the local groups, which a healthy community would have. Some communities have got some of them, but a healthy community in which constructive nationalists and proper Christians are actively involved, actually doing things, a healthy community will have more of these groups. So, for instance, the community observation patrols, well, they have kit and they need to have somewhere to meet. And it's not good to meet in a pub. You know, alcohol and community spirited patrolling do not go well together with some people. So the cops, the community observation patrols should meet there. Cleanup teams should meet there. Independent, non-woke Cub and Scout groups should meet there. The homeless aid group should be based in the kitchen there. And the bands, which working class communities in Britain used to have, and now only the Northern Ireland Protestants have. But there's a strong tradition of brass bands in all the Midlands and Northern collieries in England and Scotland and so on, and of course in Wales. And it just about clings on in some places. Well, it needs bringing back. And on that subject, I'm going to show you now a video. Where are we? Hang on. What have we got there? Walking men's groups, says Lady Matriarch. Yeah, also another thing here that gives me a thought, actually. I have to jot this down. That in many towns and suburbs in Britain now, there's a men's shed, where basically it is a shed which a group of generally middle-aged men get together and do up, and then they kit it out with tools and old sofas and so on, and they just go there and have a chat and look after each other and have a good time. And no doubt their wives are actually very happy sometimes to get them out of the house instead of moping around and just slumping in front of the telly. They go and they're part of their special community. So that could be there as well. Yeah. Andy Larson, can you donate to the Templars while here now? Not actually on this show, Andy, but join the show run by Jim Dowson here tomorrow, same time, same place. So 4 p.m. on Purge TV, and you can do so there. Right, unless Ivan is here and puts up the donation link. That would do the job. Good point, Mitch. Good point. So this little clip I want to show you is from Ballymena. Now, this is an interesting point because, and you'll see as you see this, that these chaps aren't quite in the very, very flash uniforms that is where the bands over there end up. So this is perhaps a little bit more basic. Perhaps it's a newer band. I don't know. But it's interesting with Ballymena. This is quite a small town really in the heart of the Protestant belt, where last year the local people, thousands of them, got together and put out hundreds of Roma gypsies who'd been causing all sorts of trouble. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing. Would have been far, far better if the council and the government hadn't put them there in the first place. But it's just a thing that happened. And one of the reasons it happened, no doubt, is that Ballymena has a very, very healthy community spirit. So their community, when individuals in their community are attacked and hurt by outsiders, they all come together. As a result of which, Ballymena is now peaceful and it's back to being a basically mono-ethnic town. So I want to show you this little clip of one of the bands marching in Ballymena to give you an idea of what, without having to spend a fortune on uniforms, what just with basic, simple uniform clothing, which would be illegal if you're a political party, but these people are not. It's just a local community band. But have a look at this and imagine the impact on a community where people say, oh, we're losing our way and it's not like it used to be. Imagine the impact of a band like this in a town like that in England. Imagine the impact of a band like this and knowing that a community has produced a band like that on the usual suspects who are thinking about going to predate on the young girls of that community. And I'll tell you what, they won't even risk it, because have a look, you'll see why. Isn't that absolutely fabulous? So once a community has got that kind of cohesion and spirit around a centre, then confidence will grow even more, and even more becomes possible. So just carrying on with this, for instance, it could provide a support mechanism and somewhere to meet once in a while for homeschoolers from the area. Obviously, it's going to have an upstairs. Well, it probably needs a caretaker to live there, but an upstairs office could also provide a base for a local credit union. Now, these are things which are established all over the country, generally by well-meaning, good, liberal leftists. But they do a really good job for the local community. So why the hell are well-meaning, really decent rightists not doing the same thing? Partly because they're about to waste millions and millions of pounds losing another general election, but that's another story. Also upstairs could be, why not, it's a good place for the aerial, a minicab office for a local minicab firm run by local people for local people, where even a family who are worried that their daughter's been out, she's had a drink with friends and so on, they're worried about the potential minicab driver and everything that goes on. Well, they know that after 10 o'clock, if they phone up and say, pick this little group up at such and such, and please send a lady driver, they know that will happen. At the very least, they know the driver will be one of theirs, one of ours, and not one of theirs. Out in the backyard, men with specific skills, tradesmen, can run taster training sessions for youngsters, basically mini apprenticeships in basic engine maintenance or bricklaying or carpentry or electrics or plumbing, things like that. Again, that connects actually to the men's shed, which just came up. The thing about this is that almost everything I'm talking about, there's no rocket science here. There's nothing impossibly difficult. Everything I'm talking about is already being done. It's just not being done in an organized way in the same place for our people by us. Not now. It all was done. If you went back 100 years, people and more people would be saying, well, we've got all that. What are you talking about? Because the lodges and the band halls in Northern Ireland, on the Protestant side, were built then. Or the Hibs clubs and the Gaelic athletics clubs on the Catholic side were developed and built then. And at the same time, in England and Wales and Scotland, you had miners' welfare clubs and working men's clubs and friendly societies and burial societies and Methodist chapel and the co-op movement. An enormous wave of grassroots self-improvement. People pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps and pulling up the neighbours as well. From the drunken hellholes of the early Industrial Revolution to a respectable, hard-working, proper, solid working class that went on to fight for its rights and secure them. And why did they do that then? Because they were coming out of that early Industrial Revolution hellhole, because times were hard. And hard times made tough people, tough, good people. They got on with doing things. Well, guess what? Hard times, they're not yet here. If people think they're hard yet, wait until you see what is coming. Hard times are coming again. And our people will respond and they will rally round, but they will do it quicker and they will do it more effectively if ethno-nationalists and Christians, traditionalist Christians, are in there helping and organising and leading from the front, doing the things that need doing. Now I'm going to show you one more quick clip of a Northern Ireland band in operation, because this shows something rather different actually. So I'll show it to you first and then I'll explain. You'll see the difference straight away, but then I'll explain why I think this is important. Here we go. What's important about that? If you're new to this, and many Brits are new to this, let alone Americans and Australians and so on, you need to understand that it's not some army-sponsored band or council-funded operation. That is purely working-class men doing it themselves. And there's 800 bands like that in Northern Ireland, because people put their effort into something which is good for their community. That's the first thing. Secondly, of course, they are better than any band nowadays in the British Army, which is rather shameful for the British Army and a huge feather in the cap of loyalist Northern Ireland. But also very important, that particular band is from a place called Drumderg, actually from the village of a little town of Keady, so which is a part of Drumderg. And Keady has about 3,500 people, and only 10% of them are loyalists. That band comes out of a community whose core has only 350 people in it, who are completely outnumbered, completely surrounded. And these are people who clung on in a part of South Armagh, which was basically run by the IRA. Almost every man you see in that clip will have lost someone from their family to IRA Marxist terrorism, trying to push them out. It was an ethnic cleansing campaign designed to push loyalists out of their areas. And they're still there with that pride and with that commitment and with that sheer joy that they and theirs get from it. How on earth is someone going to tell me that Muslims who can't even stand by other Muslims because they hate them, blah, 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 how on earth are they going to conquer us? People like that. And we are people like that. We're essentially the same. It's just that they've been under pressure for longer, they've had hard times, so they've come together and they stay together. And these are lessons that the English in particular still have to learn, but they're learning pretty fast. You look at what's happened with the flags. The English, once they push to it, are actually very quick learners. But that's the key takeaway from that that is from a band which, if you believe all the black pillars, that, oh, we're going to be outnumbered and then murdered in our beds. You might be if you're not organised. But if you're organised, those people, their fathers could have been murdered in their beds. They weren't, because they were organised and they stood together. So they're still there and will still be here, especially because we're not a tiny minority. We're not 10%. Even when we become a minority in 2060 or thereabouts, we'll still be the largest minority of all, far bigger than any of the others, including the Muslims or any other people that you are particularly worried about being a threat. So let's less of this black pill stuff. It's not necessary. It's very, very dangerous indeed. Get rid of the black pills. The pills you had initially, the blue pill, which kept you asleep, the red pill, which woke you up, the black pill, oh, we're all doomed, we're all going to die. The worst of the lot, actually. There's a new pill that we need. What I call this pill, not a colour, it's a thing. The steel pill. Steel for toughness, for strength. Nobody shifts it. Nothing gets through it that shouldn't. And the community strong point is going to be one of the key steel pills that our people are going to take in due course and be much the better for it. Right, let me tell you just before we finish that telling truth to Zionist power and proposing, and especially actually proposing positive practical alternatives to either just pathetic surrender or weaponized stupidity, this comes at a price. My old reach on X was destroyed, and my new one is absolutely nailed to the floor by shadow ban algorithms. The same is true on Facebook and YouTube. I was banned for years. I'm back there now, and I'm almost free to speak, but very few people are free to find out that I'm there to listen to what I've got to say. I've got coming up next month in Southwark Crown Court yet another day as the very inaccurately named Campaign Against Anti-Semitism tries to have me jailed for several years as part of its wider push to silence all critics of genocide and Talmudic supremacism. It's all a real drag, and it all costs money, and to be blunt, it's damn dangerous. But it has to be done, and I do it because I love our people and our land, our heritage and our faith, and I don't believe that we're finished as long as we learn, organise and fight. So if you appreciate what I'm doing, please lend a helping hand. A standard subscription to my Substack costs just £5 or $8 a month. Americans, Canadians are very welcome indeed. Your money's as good as anybody else's. Or you can pay for a year in one go. It's all very easy, and I'm really grateful to every supporter who digs in to help me. Special thanks, by the way, to Ive Cooper for doing so after I mentioned this on the show last week. Thanks a lot. Right. That really is all I've got time for tonight. I've got a very interesting story about Indian immigration into Germany, but I'll talk about that next week, same time, same place, as well as other things. For now, I will leave you in a moment with the end slate, which takes us back to the Iran war madness, because we're only going to get round to building strong point communities and to doing all these sort of things and to being temporarily a minority in our own homeland until one day all this is sorted out and all the peoples of the world get back to their proper places. We're only going to get anywhere near there if we don't all get blasted to hell in this utterly insane war in the Middle East. And we simply can't say whether we are or not yet. So I will leave you with the thought that we might all be and the hope that we won't be, and you'll join me here next week, same time, same place. Until then, I will remind you that the only thing that is necessary for evil to triumph is that good men do nothing. So you're good men and good women, get out there and do something. And in the meantime, remember, my friends, that we might be, as Barry Maguire said, on the eve of destruction. Good night and see you soon.
Eastern world, it is exploding, violence flaring, bullets loading. You're old enough to kill, but not for voting. You don't believe in war, but what's that gun you're toting? And even the Jordan River has bodies floating. But you tell me over and over and over again, my friend, you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction. Don't you understand what I'm trying to say? Can't you feel the fears I'm feeling today? If the button is pushed, there's no running away. There'll be no one to save with the world in a grave. Take a look around you, boy. It's bound to scare you, boy. And you tell me over and over and over again, my friend, you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction. Yeah, my blood's so mad, feels like coagulating. I'm sitting here just contemplating. I can't twist the truth, it knows no regulation. Handful of senators don't pass legislation, and marches alone can't bring integration. When human respect is disintegrating, this whole crazy world is just too frustrating. And you tell me over and over and over again, my friend, you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction. Think of all the hate there is in Red China, then take a look around to Selma, Alabama. You may leave here for 4 days in space, but when you return, it's the same old place. The pounding of the drums, the pride and disgrace. You can bury your dead, but don't leave a trace. Hate your next door neighbor, but don't forget to say grace. And tell me over and over and over and over again, my friend, you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction. you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction.